what I wanted to talk about tonight was the first thing to get into Aion. Aion. I don't know how to pronounce this word very honestly. Do you know how to pronounce it?
I just say Aion.
I think it's Aion, okay? And there are these various...
But that's only one spelling. That could be A-E-O-N, and it would be Eon.
That's Eon, yeah, but that's not what he means, and
Right.
so it's something different, right?
Okay.
But, okay, so anyway, the point of Ion is that the first 4 chapters really cover the essence of Jungian psychology, it turns out. Okay. And so chapter 1 is the ego, and so this is a picture of it provided by Dr. Edinger, which I will put onto the video. So that you can look at it. But basically what it has is, so basically what they're saying is that the ego is the first thing that you encounter in your own psychology, in your own life, is the first thing. And so that's why it is chapter 1, okay? And so he's talking about chapter 1 as an image, as we've discussed, and we'll come back to that in a minute, but I just wanted to talk about this little thing. So, so the next chapter, chapter 2, is the shadow, which we can talk about next week, and then the syzygy is chapter 3, which is the anima animus, and then the 4th chapter is the self, which is the fundamental archetype. And interestingly, I didn't bring it tonight, but I got Marie-Louise von Franz's book about fairy tales last night, and I was just starting to read through it.
I read that book. Yeah.
You did,
Yeah, it's
okay.
good.
That's
yeah.
got the, it's got the house on the feet, the Baba Van.
Right, yeah,
That's in there.
yeah, Basilis of the Wise.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and basically what she says in the introduction, I only got that far in it so far, is that all fairy tales are basically fairy tales about the self. Fundamentally, that's what she's saying, that it's one archetype in all fairy tales. So, and also she kind of dissed people who write about fairy tales and trying to connect it up to Jungian psychology, because she says fairy tales are archetypal, and the way the Jungian analysts wrote their books about fairy tales, where they dissected fairy tales, was they made it into a process of trying to analyze the person who wrote, analyzing the person who wrote the fairy tale. And she says that's not what it's about at all. It's actually about the self and how the self emerges. And so one of the important aspects of this is we aren't learning the self. I mean, correct me if you don't think this is right, but we aren't just finding the self and then trying to understand it. The self is manifesting us, and that's what individuation is, to find out what the self is trying to have us do. The self being the God image, the transpersonal self, the greater personality, whatever it is. We don't have control. It has control, right? It controls us. We don't control it. So for an artist, that's probably an easier idea to accept, right? And would you accept that? That the self is coming out through you and onto your canvas?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, yeah. I wasn't thinking canvas, but yeah. It's it's almost like you're sort of something begins to happen, and you keep adjusting it. It's sort of like trying to find the focus on a lens.
Mm-hmm.
You keep adjusting things until the focus seems to make a complete thought,
Circle.
a complete image, and and so there's this back and forth between, and I see it that way too with your personality and with your individuation. You keep trying to focus the lens so that you get a better projection of the self
Mm-hmm.
into
So
into your life.
so the ego can get it, basically, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the ego has direction and meaning.
Yeah, because the ego needs meaning,
Yeah.
right? And it's not going to get meaning unless it has it from the self.
Right. Yes.
Because if it's just ego meaning, then it's superficial. Okay, so I started to read this book when, in October or something, September, October, huh?
Aion?
I started to read it quite a while ago,
Uh-huh.
and I actually took some time out while I found the Red Book for Our Time thing, and because that made me go do the Red Book. And what is interesting to me is the most popular videos that we've had on the channel are actually just me just reading Jung's books, and and when I started to read the Red Book, oh my God! I mean, I have one video that which is like the first book or the first video I made about Thomas Arst's essay, but it's Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Thomas Arst essay, part 1, and that's had like 320 hits out of almost 500 now subscribers. So 60% of the subscribers have now hit that video. And when I actually started to read the actual Red Book oh my God, very fast people came to that. So people are looking for the Red Book online. They're looking for people to talk about it. They're looking for all kinds of things about it. But anyway, I think the most interesting thing that came out of it, and it came out of Arst, I think, is that he said, I mean, I don't think Murray Stein got it. Okay, Murray Stein is a very famous Jungian analyst. And there's a 2015 video of Murray Stein that made me furious because he said, oh, no one's interested in the Jungian Christian dialogue. Well, yeah, I mean, the way he put it, who would be interested? Because he says, well, there's about 50 Jungian analysts in the world who might have some interest in the idea of a Jungian Christian dialogue. And he says, and there are 10 maybe that would actually have enough theological knowledge and Jungian knowledge to talk about it. Only 10. And there's 2 that'll actually do it, maybe 2. And when and he says in the Red Book for Our Time, he says when Thomas Arst came to him originally, he said, haven't we said everything about the Red Book already? And Thomas Arst says, no, not at all. And he was right. And so whether we agree with him or not, okay, and I don't mind the fact that you don't agree with him, that's fine. And I also don't mind the fact that, whatever. I mean, what was either consciously or unconsciously in Dr. Jung's mind? Did he think that 1,000 years from now, people will be looking back at him as a savior? Well, yeah, maybe, because he was putting a lot of escrow into the libraries anyway. It wasn't accepted in his time, and he knew that he was going to be posthumous. But here we are in 2018, sitting around a table chatting about Carl Jung, and he's been dead for almost 70 years now, or 60 years. 60 years. Yeah. 56 years. 56. No, he's been dead for 57 years, okay? And so so why are we doing that? It's because he had such vast knowledge that it could capture our imagination. Okay, captured yours, obviously. Okay, captured mine, certainly, and it seems to also have captured Bill's, and Des's also, and now almost 500 people subscribing to the videos of these sessions, and so something there is about his work that's seeping out, even though it was suppressed by the Jungian analyst societies. Okay, because the Jungian analysts didn't want the controversial stuff about religion to come out because they thought in the mid-50s, let's say, nobody was thinking about it until the 50s because of all these wars and the Depression and everything. So there were other things that people were dealing with, survival. But once people could start thinking again, in the 50s, let's say, then they come back to this work and say, oh my God, what this guy is saying. I mean, this morning I'm reading in chapter 5 now. I'm doing chapter 5. And in chapter 5, Dr. Jung is talking about Christ as a symbol of the self. Okay. And I read that years ago. I read Aion years ago. And I said, what? Christ is the Son of God. What is he talking about? And, okay, I read through it, but I didn't grok it, not at all. And, it wasn't that I objected to what he said, and I kept reading his work because I thought there were interesting things in it, and there were things that I didn't understand, and I wanted to try to get a handle on it. But, what he is saying is absolutely revolutionary. Absolutely. For example, he's saying that...
For Western thought.
Huh?
For Western thought.
Right, for Western thought. Yeah, precisely, for Western thought. Because, the Buddhists were talking about duality too, but they're talking about duality. But here, we're not talking about the devil a lot. We're saying, focus on the good. Just keep your eyes on the good and forget the evil. And the problem is, the evil doesn't forget us, right? And this is the fundamental question that you were pushing me on a year and a half ago about, should we bring these shadow things up into our consciousness? Isn't that dangerous? And ultimately what Edinger said was, you have to reflect on it. And if you reflect on the shadow stuff, then maybe things will come out a little bit on the good. It's not necessarily they're going to be great, but it'll be a little bit better than if you didn't bring it up. And, and basic, pardon?
I don't follow that. But it's, I know what you're getting at. I just don't follow your way of thinking about it.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. Do you have a way of thinking about it?
Well, I can't just say what you just said because it didn't make sense to me. But
Okay.
but what I
mean,
would
we
say,
have to read through it and get through it.
yeah, when when you're talking about the shadow, you just have to. That just means that you've recognized that for what's the positive aspects of your representation of whatever it is you're representing, there's a negative side to it as well, and you just it's like you have to be accepting of the fact that you've selected a part of it, and that's what you're working with, but that the other part also is there, and that you can't deny it. You just have to assimilate it all. You have to
You have to accept that it's part of you.
yes, and then go on, and you're working your focus, but you don't deny anything. You don't deny what's out of focus.
Right.
You just say, I'm going to work this part of the and allow the other to be there, and I won't condemn myself for it being there. I won't. It's part
Right.
of what goes on, and it's
Well, and I think that that's what the church has had us do for
Sure.
a long while,
I agree.
which is to have us condemn ourselves for certain things.